Good morning, everyone. My name is Urvin Tucker. I'm the product manager on the mobile SDK team. Today, we're going to talk about building beautiful apps using mobile SDK. So, forward-looking statement, a lot of the things we'll be talking about here is what we plan to do in the next year. So please make your purchase decisions appropriately. By show of hands, how many of us are at the conference but still working, checking emails? I see a lot of people. Come on, it's okay. We realize it. The new reality is that our users and our employees are no longer contained and constrained to their offices. We are here at the conference, checking emails, as I said, and that's a new revolution. Mobile has enabled that. Our users have come to expect much better experiences. Doesn't matter whether you're employees or you're end users. And we know big industries have been displaced because of the mobile revolution. Uber, for example, completely displaced the taxi industry. Today, when you take a taxi, you are looking at Uber as a more preferred choice. And Uber did that using the capabilities that are available on the mobile devices. They used, and as the mobile devices matured, they made their experiences better and better. And the users, basically, or the consumers, loved that. Now, that actually goes back to the statement I just made earlier, which is great experiences is what the users need. And the reality is, research found that the IT departments have capacity to only deliver 20% of what the users are really asking for. So there's this 80% backlog that's difficult to meet. And our goal is to help you, is to enable you to meet that 80%. So we built the mobile SDK. The SDK is there to help you build your apps much faster, in a much more efficient way, and reduce your time to market. The SDK gives you enterprise identity. We know that identity is critical, whether it's your consumer or your employee. You make your decisions in terms of what you show based on the identity. And so, out of the box, the SDK gives you the identity in general. Having a smart store or encrypted database enables you to store your information on your client devices securely, and something that you can manage even remotely. Smart Sync is our library to enable building offline apps. Users are not always in great network conditions. Sometimes they have really bad network, and they're making changes, they're making edits, and you don't want to lose those things. Having the offline capability is something that the users, depending if you have a field users, is something they would really appreciate. And most importantly, all of this is available to you as consistent APIs, whether you are a native developer or a hybrid developer. You like to use Polymer, React Native, Angular, Ionic, pick. It's your choice. Or you want to build native apps using the Xcode or Android Studio. Again, we do not discriminate with any of these. You can pick whatever you like. And pick whatever your customers need, right? I think that's the most important thing. And all of this, and all the new features that we're building in the clouds, whether it be the Wave, the Analytics Cloud, the services, and all these new features that you're going to hear at Dreamforce, all of this is also going to be accessible to you as snap-ins or consistent APIs through the SDK. So, how many of you here has also heard about the Salesforce One App? Right? It's one of our most popular apps. And one question that we always get is, why do I need the SDK when I cannot just go and build the app and use Salesforce? Salesforce One is a great app. It allows you to communicate to your employees, to your users, when you know who they are. But if you are building a customer-facing app, an app or like your users don't know to go to Salesforce One and then interact with you. They want to interact with your brand. They want to know, and they're going to search in the App Store with your brand name. That's when SDK comes into picture. If you need to build an app that accesses your customer data, the customers are interacting with you, you need a fully branded experience. The SDK gives you that. And your employees can continue to use the Lightning experience on the web, so they don't need to learn anything new. So it's a win-win for both of them. Let's take a look at one more app, Midgenwerk. Here's an app it's built by PostNL, which is a postal company in Netherlands. The app actually it's built for their employees, their mailmen. In the morning, they come in, they share, or they take a look at what the route is going to be, and they can track their status, how they are doing, and along the way, they can actually post updates back to the office. So the back office and the mailmen are always in touch. They can update the routes. They can make sure that everything is going well, and if there are any obstructions or changes, it can be communicated back to the mailman. And because they are out in the field, they not always have great network. So this app leverages the offline capability or the smart sync that we just talked about. It's a great app, and they really appreciate it, and their mailmen really appreciated it. So where do we go from here? We have been hearing all your feedback. We know, and we have been observing the industry trends and changes in the platform that are happening. And in the next year, we're going to basically support iOS 10 and Android 7. I mean, it's table stakes. We realize your users are on these new platforms. You want to take advantage of all the new capabilities, and we don't want the SDK to hold you back. So this is, to me, it's no-brainer. With iOS 10, we also saw that they have opened a lot more intent extensions, like Siri, like Watch. And we've already had a few conversations with our customers who want to take advantage of these. So in the next year, we're going to give you more access and help you better manage the authentication for the extensions. Again, you can do that today in the current version, but there is a lot of heavy lifting that you need to do in your apps. And we just think that we can take it on ourselves and give you out of the box. The offline capabilities and smart sync improvements. Today, as I mentioned, that app really uses that well, and they're really happy with it. But just like any other product, we can always do better. We believe one of the features that have been asked really consistently is, hey, how can we batch all these requests so that we are not making one API call for every update that we are making to sync it back up to the service? So that's one of the features amongst many others that we'll continue to make and invest in our Smart Sync library. Your apps are not contained only to using Salesforce One. We know that you might be using other services like Heroku, services like AWS. And the authentication that you need to do between your Force.com identity and these services is something that you have to manage today in your app. Again, this is one of the other places where we believe that we can support you better by supporting OpenID or JWT tokens so that you can exchange those JWT tokens against these services and authenticate your users. Social login like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn are also some things that we believe that the apps are using, especially if you're building a community app. So we are going to let you build better experiences with using your any of the social supports or social identity providers. And take advantage essentially here for the app. If it is already installed, you don't need to launch a web view, put in username and password, agree to the data being exchanged, and go through that. It's all about building beautiful experiences. So if you have the app there, we will exchange it in the background, give you the tokens, authenticate the user on the service. Metadata components for JavaScript. Again, this personally for me is a great feature. A lot of the apps are going through this issue where personally I've seen this. There's a small string change that I need to make in my app, but it's really bad. It impacts a particular region, and my only option is to either wait until the next app release or push an app update immediately, go through a hotfix cycle. And it's difficult to always justify a string change for the whole release because releases are expensive. What we want to enable is to give you access to the metadata that you already have on Salesforce. And you can build your apps in a much smarter way. You can take advantage of the layout changes or string changes for your localization needs or anything else that you have on as metadata. We're going to give you a quick demo of this later in the session. Who can guess or who can tell me the theme for this Dreamforce? Right? I mean, you see the big posters out there, the great jackets, they all have one thing: trailblazers. The theme is we want to increase the number of trailblazers we have. We want to make sure that we have more developers. We want to make sure that you can write much more beautiful apps. And we also recognize setting up your development environment just to get a Hello World on mobile app is difficult. You go through, you download a bunch of dependencies, you download a bunch of tools and IDEs, even before you can start writing and see your Hello World in there. We think that using the Trailhead Playground app is something we can help you get there faster. If you could just start writing your JavaScript and HTML, host it somewhere, point this app to that URL, and see the experience that you have, that you just built, without having to download IDE, without having the need for Xcode, per se, or having to run it on the simulator. You can quickly share your ideas, your prototypes with your peers, with your customers, and see how they feel about it. And again, no need to kind of download all that. And once you're definitely ready, yes, you will have to. There's no way around it. But at least to get you going there faster, we think this can really be helpful. Along with the same thread, we want more trailblazers. So we're going to continue to help and build more sample apps, and we're going to give you more templates to help you get going. We know developers love to look at a sample code, understand it, modify it, and then go with it. Documentation is great. We're going to continue to invest in documentation. There's no substitute for that. But at the same time, we want to make sure that you guys also have the sample code so that you can leverage all of these features that we're building in the next year. I'm pretty sure this is all great. And let's take one more minute to talk about the release rhythm and the philosophy that the SDK team is going to adopt for the next year and going forward. Every platform, like Android and iOS, makes major changes once a year. And we are always trying to keep up with it. And many times we feel that so it's difficult, right? I mean, the changes happen. Sometimes we need to make the changes. They deprecate features, and we have to obey those as well. SDK is going to take a release every year, which we are calling the foundation release. And that will be our major release version in general, where we're going to package all these breaking changes and the foundation things that we need to put in place. A lot of refactoring. The developers here can not agree more that at any point in time, or after some point in time, you have to go back to your code, refactor, make sure it is on a stable foundation so that you can build newer features much better. We're going to do the same. We're going to take a release, make those changes, and so that for the rest of the year, we can ship all these new features in a much more stable way for you so that it's easy for us and for you to debug, and it's a lot more reliable for all of us. Enough talking. I'm sure you guys want to take a look at some demos. I'm going to invite Ivan here, who's going to give us a quick demo of the Dreamhouse app, which is something that you will also see in the developer keynote tomorrow. And on Friday, we're going to walk you through this step by step.
Hello. Hi. My name is Ivan. I'm a developer on Mobile SDK team. And today I'm going to talk about building consumer apps using React Native and Mobile SDK. When I was preparing for this talk, I started like most of people would start with a document with slides and started building slides. And it was kind of slow for me because normally I code, don't write slides. So basically, I ended up coding. I created a React Native app, which is pretty much like a slideshow. And the reason why I did it, because the message that I'm going to talk about is React Native is a very productive environment. If it is productive, let's see how quickly we can build a slideshow. So I have created this app. It has a menu and some slides. So why React Native? We all on daily basis use native apps, and some of them are really awesome, very performant, and if good performance, UX, and design get together, the result is amazing. But very often, native apps are not as good. Very often they are slow, very boring, and have a lot of not too much functionality. The reason is that native coding is hard. So even let's take Swift, that is supposed to be very, very simple to use. This is just an example of simple fetch request where you get call some URL, get JSON, and try to work with this. See how many lines. So you have to always, basically you have to create a request, and after a call session, on session you send a request, check status, all this wrap with try catch, because you don't know you are calling for REST API, so anything can arrive, especially in CRM world. So you need to be very, very defensive about data that you receive. So basically, it's hard. And many developers are actually afraid of making mistake, crash their app. It will take a while to fix the app, send it to App Store, do code review. So basically, they try to be very defensive and short on features. And this is how we get all these boring apps that looks pretty much like a tutorial. People just modify some stuff, but all of them the same. So actually, in this setup, React Native gives a kind of interesting opportunity. On one hand, it is very productive for coders. On the other hand, it has fairly good performance. This is example of fetch JSON from some URL. You see the code is much, much shorter. Of course, this is JavaScript. It works both iOS and Android. And I know a lot of people, when hear about some new JavaScript framework for mobile, they feel skeptical. There were so many failed attempts in the past. But the point is that React Native is not another hybrid framework. First of all, it doesn't run inside WebView. So it runs on separate JavaScript thread. And most of actually React Native code is native. It uses a lot of native threads. And because it is using React, like very, very smart framework, it does asynchronous rendering to native views. So basically, output is fully native. And another very, very strong feature of React is declarative components. So basically, you start coding instead of writing lines of code and trying to handle all these different transformations. You declaratively create components. And this is sample markup of a simple component. Just has renderer, view, text inside it. Another thing, feature about React Native efficient rendering. So what it does, it actually has this concept of virtual DOM on JavaScript side of code, which knows actually state of your app. And based on it, it does surgical, very, very efficient updates to your UI. So for example, if you modify view, framework figures out what exactly needs to be done to modify it instead of wiping out the whole DOM tree and like UI tree and re-rendering it again. Of course, native views. Native views, this is something that gives you really good performance and native feel, because one thing that really fails in all these hybrid solutions where you use UI view inside your app is touch. All these touch events, they don't feel native, and you immediately see this is probably runs inside WebView. Here, in this case, you have native views, so you have full freedom of registering all these events and responding to it. Another strong feature is really native components. So if you work with, you have lists, scrolls, navigation, and many other components fully native. Another great feature of React, which is where productivity comes from, is reusable components. So if you start using components, you automatically have very, very clean code, very modular. You can share components cross-platform, Android, iOS. Cross-project, teams can share components. And you can distribute your components with NPM, distribution manager, and use a lot of open source components. And it's pretty easy to test. React Native and Mobile SDK. So Mobile SDK works with all sorts of different, frameworks. We support Cordova, many different setups. So last year, Mobile SDK made available all the standard API, authentication, networking, Smart Store, and Smart Things to React Native. On top of it, Mobile SDK team has added CLI. So basically, you can with CLI you can create, get started very quickly coding your React Native just by using template. And on top of it, we are adding experimental libraries for React Native components. One is called data containers. It is hosted on Salesforce.labs. And this lets you very easily, in a declarative way, connect to your Salesforce data and retrieve information without building queries and waiting on response. Everything is taken care of by the components. So basically, you work declaratively, and I will show you sample code. And another thing that we have added is a base UI theme for Salesforce. This is something that lets you get running very quickly. So basically, you can start using components that look like Salesforce. They use Salesforce fonts, Salesforce colors, and basic elements like buttons, styles, and stuff. And more than that, it uses icons. So icons are already available for you. You don't need to bundle it, standard Salesforce icons. So with this, we have built a Dreamhouse mobile app with React Native on top of Mobile SDK, and we're going to show it to you. I'm starting development environment for this app.
Good.
So basically, this is a consumer example of consumer app. It has properties, brokers. You can search for properties, look into the properties. You can favorite some properties. You have favorite list. You can swipe out. List of brokers. And the interesting thing about this app that you can code similar apps very, very quickly because you use data containers. I can show you how the code looks like. So, for example, we have my profile, right? This is a user view of a person that logged in. In this case, I logged in. And let's see how this app is built using data containers. So this is the code. We render the page, and we wrap this page with a object data container, something that will make us available information about that object. We pass type user and pass ID that we get from authentication. After it, we wrap it with scroll refresh container component. Inside, we have header and logout button, header body. So let's look into body, how body is implemented. So again, very short code to render name and time zone. All these data containers, if you give you all this functionality, force refresh update, it automatically saves data to Smart Store. And another strong thing of data containers is that you can use layouts. So, for example, you want to show some component, and you don't know what fields exactly admins want to display. So you can fall back quickly to compact layout and say, here, I just want to render compact layout. And we're going to demonstrate how flexible it is.
So I like this view, as you can see. But I also feel, Ivan, that the broker is somewhere at the top. I think we should focus on the property information and keep that at the top. So let's quickly make that change. I mean,
yeah, probably. Yeah, price is more important than broker. Let's see how we can do it. Me as admin, I go modify compact layout, move broker down. I could do much more than that. I could create new field, could customize it. I save it. And here, what we do a force update. And let's see what happens. So now compact layout has changed, and broker is on the bottom. And it works. So
yeah, that's great.
Ta-da.
Yeah. And all of this, the admins have the power to make the changes. And you don't need to do an app update. You don't need to do a push every time. You need to make a small changes. Quickly, let's go back to the keynote. So here are some useful resources for you guys. I mean, we have a mobile trailhead that you can go through it and start developing your apps. There is an SDK homepage where we are updating and giving new updates. We are very active on the Google Plus community. So if you have any questions somewhere, like if you get stuck, please reach out to us. We'll be happy to help you. There are a lot of other community members as well who would be happy to help you, and they might be running into the same problems. And the app that we just showed, you can get access to that on dreamhouseapp.io. It's an open source project, just like everything. And with that, just wanted to thank you, everybody, for coming in and listening to this session. And we hope to see great apps that you build in the App Store. Thanks.